Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the 55 Project in Briyah Institute series, Nature Connects Art and Science. Episode 2, focusing on architecture and resilience. So it's my pleasure to be joined today by Mariana Montag, Alessandra Araújo, and Wesley Kin. And also Maria Fúfaro, my partner from the 55. Sorry, Maria, I was introducing the panelists. I forgot about it, but thank you for being with me.
No, but just the beginning.
Yeah, so I will start by asking Maria to speak a little bit about the 55 Project, Ancestry and Dystopia, which inspired us to get the series going. So Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, everybody. I think it's very important to situate and explain a little bit about our project. You know, the 55 Project Arts Foundation was founded in 2017. Basically, the mission is to promote the Brazilian visual arts and outside of Brazil, with main focus in South Florida and United States. And we did some projects outside as well, Chicago, New York. And it's like an ongoing project with a very extensive and vibrant, calendar with a program that varies from like solo exhibitions, collective exhibitions, special projects, residents. And so we have a lot of projects basically to explore, to create more visibility for Brazilian artists and visual arts. For this project, we also incorporate a lot of social components, education components, like this one, like today we talking about architecture, environment, and art. So this is like a whole creating opportunities for critical thinking process. And right now, we have like an exhibition, a collective exhibition called Forest, Ancestry and Dystopia, created by Éder Chiodeto, that brings together like 16 renowned Brazilian artists, like Cláudia Andujá, Luiz Braga, Luciana Magnus, Gisela Mota, Valda Marques, a lot of artists. At Achugari Gallery, we launched this exhibition on February, and it's going to be on view until July 16 at Achugari Gallery. Open from Tuesday to Saturday from 10 to 4 p.m. But it's open to the public, so I really would like to, if you live in Miami, South Florida, and go and take a look and check this exhibition. And because of this exhibition, Adriana, thank you very much. We, in collaboration with Briyah Institute, we create this talk series to explore different components that have some relation with this exhibition that talks about natural resource, powerful multi-diverse ecosystems, and something like that. So I can't wait to see you guys discussing and have this conversation.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. As a proud ambassador of the 55 Project, I am very happy that we are doing this series together. So it's an opportunity to learn more about the artist, about art in general, but also what we do in Briyah is to bring people awareness about the way we think. And there is this natural way of thinking, which is systems thinking. As systems, natural systems that we are, we can all take advantage of that, especially in times of complexity, confusion, chaos. This is very helpful. And the series highlights exactly that. So nature is all around us. It is a magnificent process that inspires art, that informs science, and we can do so much more. We still haven't explored it as much. And so this is the point of the series, Nature Connects Art and Science. And in this episode, focusing on architecture and resilience, I believe it also speaks very close to everybody, because architecture has to do with designing the structures that we live in. Resilience has to do with this ability to recover quickly from difficulties, has to do with elasticity, with plasticity, and this is a foundation of life. So the more we hear about brain plasticity, our ability to recover, I think we ought to be more curious even to see what nature can teach us and how we can bring that closer to us. And architecture is the way to do it. So I am very proud to also be here with amazing artists and science. It's hard to tell who's the artist, who's the science, because they're all very artistic and use a lot of science in the work they do. But let me go straight to introducing our guests today and start the conversation, because this is what we came here to do. So I'll start with Mariana. Mariana, welcome. Mariana is an architect, an urban planner with research line in self-construction, gender, and ancestry. She graduated in architecture and urbanism and is a master's student at Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie in São Paulo, Brazil, with training in psychoanalysis at the Deep Institute in São Paulo and studies in awareness-based action research community for profound individual and institutional renewal at the ULab 2X by the Presidency Institute at MIT here in the US. So she has been developing self-built housing for women in rural areas for 3 years now, with communities in Uganda, Mexico, through the organization called A Casa, led jointly with Brazilian architect Luisa Tripoli. So the project A Casa de Jaja, her graduation project, won the award Beyond Bauhaus, prototyping the future organized by Germany, Land of Ideas, displaying this project at CLB Berlin Aufbauhaus and nominated Forbes Under 30 Brazil among the 90 highlights of young people under 30 in the year of 2020 of Forbes Magazine's Brazil. So congratulations, Mariana, and thank you for joining us. We are also joined today by another architect, an amazing architect that is from Miami, the founder of CODA. So Wesley, welcome. So founder and principal of the award-winning multidisciplinary design firm CODA, which stands for Can Office for Design and Architecture, and is a Miami Beach-based practice designing with ambition for its clients and optimism for the world. So before moving to Miami in 2005, Wesley apprenticed under his father, a local builder and carpenter in the Lakes region of New Hampshire. Wesley is an active member of the American Institute of Architects and a visiting critic at the University of Miami, Florida International University, and also Miami-Dade College, so the 3 top universities here in the Miami area. Prior to founding CODA, Wesley was mentored by renowned architects, Terence Riley, Alan Schulman, as well as landscape art architect Raymond Jungles. Sorry for my bad pronunciation of their names. Wesley earned a Bachelor of Architecture degree at the University of Miami, which included an urban design, architectural theory, and history of architecture program in Rome, Italy. So congratulations for the great work, Wesley, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the kind introduction. Happy to be here.
And last but not least, Alessandra Araújo. She is an innovation designer with a focus on sustainability and biomimicry. I am so excited about that, you guys. Let's wait and see what she has to tell us about it. She graduated in biology by Unisa, Brazil, and has a master's in environmental biochemistry by the University of Hawaii here in the US, sustainable urbanism at the Schumacher College in the UK, sustainability management by Fundação Dom Cabral in Brazil. She's a certified biomimicry professional by Biomimicry 3.8, and also from Arizona State University here in the US. Professional experience in project management in the retail, telecommunications, and industrial and public sectors, as well as consulting for sustainable strategies. So she's also experienced in developing social and environmental diagnostics for public areas and communities. She's the founder of BioInspirations, which works with education and consulting for innovation inspired by nature. She is a professor of biomimicry at Architecture Association, Amazon Visiting School, and Master Ecological Design Thinking of Schumacher College in England. She is also a member of Chi Integrates. So congratulations also, Alessandra, for the great trajectory, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Adriana. Nice to be with you all.
Great. So this is supposed to be a conversation. We have about an hour and so to have to share our stories. And I like to also start with the beginning. Okay, so what was nature for you growing up? So how did nature inspire your early days and shaped the way you work to some extent right now? So I will just start at random. I want to listen to the three of you, and feel free to share your stories with our audience. And thank you again for the audience who's joining us, Flavia, Gabriela, Paula. Thank you for being with us, and I think more will come. So I will start with Alessandra, please. I would love to hear how nature inspired you in the beginning.
Well, I hope my English is good, and I hope it can be understood by everyone. It's been a while that I don't practice because of COVID. I'm not traveling, I'm not teaching abroad, so I don't know how it's gonna go. But anyways, I think since very young, I was totally blessed by nature. I thought nature was somehow of a miracle. I didn't understand how a flower could bloom. I understand how a bean in the wet cotton could create the roots and also the stem and grow up, and was really impressed by those process. And since very young, since I don't know, 3 years old, 4 years old, and I used to visit farm with my family, my grandfather. I think he played an important role for me to be a biologist, because we go to see the cattle, we go to see vegetables, this and that, and I was all the time super impressed by this miracle of life. So I think studying biology, it was a way to try to understand this. I still don't know this miracle of life, because it's true, for me, it's a mix of science. Science explains a lot, and I do believe in science, truly. But also there's some magic in the natural world that it's really amazing. So I don't know, nature, it's been always on by my side. My professional career, in a way, I got a little bit away, because I worked with architecture for 14 years, or 12 years as a partner. So, but somehow it was always close. So biomimicry came to connect those dots. So great. I don't know if I got far away from your question, but
no, that's fine. And we'll come back to the biomimicry part a little bit. But let me listen to Mariana. Mariana, how about you? How did nature started inspiring you in your early days? Tell us the story.
Well, I have a particular place in Brazil. Well, just to say, Brazil, I think that's a country that you're very influenced already by nature. So nature has a very strong presence. Although I was born and I grew up in a humongous city with 20 million people, but I was constantly being brought by my family to a place called Boistucanga, that is in the North Bay area of São Paulo. And I remember that I learned everything within nature and not being so cautious about it, which means that I was never being very much guided on how to relate myself to nature. So I was learning how to walk, how to ride a bike, how to swim in nature. So also how I feel about nature in that specific moment of my life, nature was teaching me to be also respectful, perceptive, that it could be good, but it could also have some strong lessons, right? When you're swimming in the ocean, you're a little kid, you have to watch out. So that's how I feel that I was being raised and relating myself to nature. within nature. So not seeing nature as something apart, but also seeing nature as this big and very deep teacher of how to take my first steps in life. So that definitely resonated, not growing up and having to have this Western thought rationalizing nature and constantly being separated, but actually was that's not the way that I've been brought. The nature was also always a part that I was a part of it. So how it resonated after in my future choices, that I feel that we are going to talk a little bit more about it. It's it's looking for this integration, looking for this belonging in nature as a teacher, as it always was a part of my life since I was a kid.
Yes, you're blessed. And I think you're right. In Brazil, we do have this blessing of being close to nature since we're young, and understanding that we are not a part, we are part of nature. We're not a part of, separate from, but we're part of. So thank you, Mariana, for sharing that. Wesley, so you're the only one who's not a Brazilian here.
Right. I was going to say, I feel a little bit outside of the box, but being in Miami, I guess that's not too unusual. I'm usually the minority here. Yeah, I mean,
surrounded by Brazilians all the time too.
Exactly. So. Yes. I love it. It's great. I mean, I guess for me, living here, to pick off what's been said already, Miami is somewhat similar to Brazil in that it's a sort of subtropical region. So you're definitely kind of immersed in the experience of nature here. But it's interesting because growing up in New England, where I'm from, in a small town in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, there's a different type of nature, right? And I think what I appreciated there was the fact that the seasons sort of teach us a valuable lesson about nature, and that it is about systems and how things sort of, they grow, they bloom, they fall, in winter they sort of die, but then they come back. And that was a really valuable lesson to me, I guess, for life, but and it translates to the work as well. But specifically, I remember as a kid when my older brother would take a toy, or I would get, reprimanded by my parents or something like that. I remember I used to run away, and in the back, sort of off the back of the house, there was a pine forest of these really, really big trees. And then I would run in there and run up the tree and hide. And at the time, I thought it was really about kind of getting away from that. But later I learned that it was really about kind of being in the solitude of that forest, and, really understanding your sort of place within it, and the silence of it all, and the sort of scent, and how now when I go back with my own children, how nostalgia kind of brings you back. So I've found that nature really plays an integral role, both in terms of lessons through this idea of seasons, which we don't have so much here in Miami, but are prevalent elsewhere. And then this idea of systems, where nothing is singular in nature. Everything is related, from the fungi below the ground and how they are communicators between trees, and the water systems that are found in rivers, lakes, and how those feed oceans, and how everything is sort of interconnected. And I think when I grew up in a home there, it was always about architecture being shelter. Like, it was sort of the way that you got out of the cold, or you got out of the rain, or in the summer you would get out of the heat, in the case of Miami. But I think it plays a more integral role, and a lot of what our work does is we try to break down those barriers and celebrate that integrity between our relationship as human beings within nature, and the building's relationship itself. So that's sort of, I know we're going to get into probably more of the details of our work, but that's sort of the long and short of my story, and how nature has really inspired it.
And you mentioned the seasons. I think of cycles, and you're right. Miami doesn't have the 4 seasons like you did growing up, but we sure know what it is when we talk about hurricane season, right? So there is a cycle in itself.
Yes.
That is very peculiar to us in Miami.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
The force of nature is around us no matter where we are. So
yeah, it sort of makes us respect it in a way. You know, it sort of reminds us that, you know, we think we're sort of the top of the food chain, but really there's something much bigger beyond us. And that's something that we have to take seriously in our work and in our everyday lives, because obviously with what's going on with climate change and its impacts on those systems is a direct result of the kind of way that we're living our lives. So, you know, that's also another lesson I think we can learn from it.
correct. Yes, and speaking of lessons, I know we have an expert in biomimicry with us, and biomimicry is this new science that more and more is being used for different disciplines to complement different disciplines. But and it's all based in nature. So it's a science based in nature that is informing design, that is informing art. So I would like to start with Alessandra again to say, okay, so what is this biomimicry? What does this represent, and how, you know, this informs the work you do, Alessandra, please.
Biomimicry, that's how it's like the slogan, innovation inspired by nature. So what it is, we try to understand what nature is doing, like this tragedy, and how it's doing, and create that bridge into innovation, into any sort of design. I'm not saying to tangible design, can be intangible design, can be anything, can be translated to process, communication, and not only to things that can be built, tangible things. So I think biomimicry as a creative journey, it's quite new, but as an observation skill from human being looking to nature to learn and to do things, it's has some 1,000 years, because we always learn with nature. We learned a lot with nature. What we did lately, we forget how to learn from nature. Like since we got electricity, and after all those wars and everything, and time is money, and all those shortcuts that capitalism, and how we develop systems and organizations and this and that, we somehow put nature into a part, into something different, something that you need to take a car, a train, airplane in order to visit for weekends, for holidays, but not into your daily life. So we need to somehow to understand that we are nature, we are part of nature, and we are nature in parts. Everywhere is nature. Can be a little bit different, can be a liquid dinosaur as as an oil, but everything comes from planet Earth, and sometimes we forget this a little bit. So what biomimicry try to do a lot in first place is to reconnect with this ethos, this concept about life creates conditions conducive to life. So if you're going to create something inspired by nature, it's to bring more life. It's not to bring change any life cycle. It's to open up others' life cycles. And so this is the ethos part. And another very important aspect is the reconnection, which is try to remember how we were when we were growing up. That was very curious, and we used to ask for our parents, our grandfathers, grandmothers, adults, what was this, what was that, how this possible, explain. We were so curious about life, trying to understand things. So this reconnect thing about biomimicry is to remember this curiosity of learning, and not only to understand biology, ecology deeply, but to have this curiosity of this observation skill most of all. And the third element of biomimicry would be the creation part, which has a methodology. I don't like this word methodology, because it's a very dynamic process with some comes and goes, with some returns, with some actions. but it has a process, like design process. We have a process called biomimicry thinking. So we have design thinking, you have biomimicry think. And what biomimicry tries to do is to have a new lens, how we look into nature with a different lens. So it's not only a tree, so you have two plants, one beside one another. It's like how those, what's the shape of the form of the leaves? Are they behaving to the context in the same way, or they deal with water or shade or whatever pressure in a different way? So it's this observation skill to see how just like whatever form, it's a form of communication. It's also a design that responding to some pressure. So what is this communication? I used to call this dance of life. So how life is dancing to what being exposed. So biomimicry, it's endless stuff, because you're never gonna learn everything about nature and how nature is responding, because nature is very wise and nature is always responding, even though in climate change, and it's responding by death, or responding by another species that is arising, and there's no judgment of quality. Life is always responding to some contest, to some pressure. So what we try to do in biomimicry, it is looking to this evolution response and see how this evolution response can be applied to business, can be applied to organizations, to architecture, to how we do our painting system, how we do textile, how we do everything, how we can make those process and those creations more attuned to life.
And I could go on forever here. I have a curiosity before I go to Mariana or Wesley, but why is it called biomimicry 3.8?
Because life is being on Earth 3.8 billion years.
Okay. So still a long way to go to learn everything.
And we've been here 300,000 years. So we're still babies. That's why we do so many mistakes. We're babies on the road.
Right.
And it's beautiful that you mentioned the evolutionary process. Life is movement, and we are part of it. We're not a part. We are part. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll jump to Wesley. I was going to go to Mariana, but I see Wesley already excited there to comment. And I know that the work he's doing now here in Miami has everything to do with what you just described, Alessandra. So Wesley, please, how has
so it's really fascinating because, the office, we have private work that we work with clients, and then we have the academic and theoretical work and research that we run also through the office. And both sort of complement each other, and both are focused on ways in re-engaging the human experience with nature. And so in the example of the theoretical research, the most recent project, we were looking at Biscayne Bay, and through previous examples and researching the sort of vulnerable components of the bay, whether it be seagrasses, manatee, mangrove, etc., finding ways where architecture can actually, the intervention of architecture could be more restorative than disruptive in that case. And it was really fascinating because, you may remember that in the 1980s, Christo and Jean-Claude did a project called Surrounded Islands, where they sort of took this pink fabric and surrounded it around all the natural islands in the bay. And there was a lot of resistance to this. There was a lot of environmental activism kind of going against this artistic idea. But what they found through their careful scientific research and tests that they had done before implementing the art exhibit was that the pink fabric did a few things. One is that it kept boats off of the islands. And so because of that, birds started to come back to those islands. And because birds came back and, there were droppings, they started to see some more of the kind of fauna, natural flora and fauna coming back. It also, manatees would take refuge in those locations because what they found was that the pink fabric, as the sunlight came through, it sort of filtered the light in interesting ways and actually activated their reproductive system. So it was sort of like a Marvin Gaye of the sea, if you will. So it was interesting to us because it proved that architectural intervention doesn't always have to be negative, that if carefully studied and carefully implemented, it could have a positive impact on these systems. Of course, there are terrible examples, particularly in Florida, from the efforts to kind of drain the Everglades and re-engineer the natural systems that existed here, and the effects we're dealing with that today as well. So it takes a real careful and thorough analysis and understanding the responsibility of what we're doing when we're looking at those things. And then in the private side, there's also, when we're shaping our environment through architecture, whether that's through the building of our cities or our homes and everything in between, we as human beings have a very unique sort of responsibility in that those buildings that we create, those cities that we shape, actually alter our own evolution, right? So when you look at the history of the evolution of the world, we are a very, very small sliver of that. But yet in that time period, we've really kind of redirected the sort of natural systems of the world in somewhat of a negative way. But in our private work, we try to recognize that and use nature, whether that be the way the sun moves across the site, the way that winds move, the way that air flows naturally through heat and wind, etc. We try to allow the building to respond to those things. And I think, in a way, tying it back to biomimicry, if you were to sort of do an analysis of a particular plant or tree, it's not fully abstract. It may look abstract, the way that the trunk grows and the way the branches extend from the trunks and the way that the leaves are shaped, or even, whether the leaves are glossy finished or matte finished, whether the trunk has a sort of, like I'm thinking of the silk floss tree, which has the thorns on the trunk. These things are in response to its environment, right? Whether it's protecting itself from other competing trees in the area or predatorial animals that might disrupt the natural system of the tree. In the same way, we like our architecture to respond to its environment through the private work. So we're very excited about this topic, and we try to create very radical solutions to these very complex problems like climate change and sea level rise. So, and we're happy to do it.
It's so beautiful the way you said it, because you said architecture responds to the environment. And Alessandra was saying that life and nature responds to whatever happens too. So it is this dance, this feeling and responding and creating. And I remember a systems thinker that I admire greatly. Unfortunately, he passed recently, Humberto Maturana, Chilean, and he, with Varela, coined the term autopoiesis, which is this ability of self-generation that we all have as living systems, and nature has in a bigger scale, right?
Right.
And we pursuing that in how we think and what we do, and in architecture, to be specific about this conversation here, is about that dance. It's responding, but it's creating based on this power we have for synergistic effects and for taking into consideration things that maybe weren't taken in consideration before, but that promote this reconnection. And with that, I want to go to Mariana. So Wesley mentioned re-engaging the human experience with nature. And I know that's exactly what you do with your projects, Mariana. So please tell us your story. How has nature informed the work you're doing?
Well, I think that in the ACASA organization, what we aim to do, it's learning directly from the people that already embrace that in their daily lives. So the women in the rural areas, their daily life is to actually maintain the soil's health. So they cultivate the soil, they teach the generations how to cultivate the soil, so they live and their daily actions they mitigate the effects of climate change, but they're the ones most affected to the climate changes. So what we found out is, what if we as architects, we serve the social demands of these women, and we learn from their life values how to produce architecture. So not seeing architecture as a product, but as architecture is our tool, because we are architects and we wanted to learn from them and produce a different architectural discourse. We ask ourselves, so what if architecture is not a product but a process? Which means that not only we're talking about nature, but we are talking about all of the instances within architecture. So how do we think? How do we build? How actually is the metrical system affecting the way that we treat each other? So we have constant talks with, for example, in Uganda, with Jaja, Nanono Immaculate, all of the women that we work, coincidentally, they have the same age. They're 76 years old. And Jaja, when we first started working with her, so we constantly talk and cooperate and try to translate their life values into architectural processes, which means that we definitely attend their desires as a matter of program in their houses, but we understand how is their life daily routines could be reproduced inside a work site, which means that we can create a work site of building a house, deepening human relationship and exchanging knowledge, which what we saw is what nature is constantly doing, acknowledging the diversity, acknowledging that we can be different and coexist and create constantly things together. So our first experience was to build Jaja's house, but we did also with students. So what we see that we're making the bridge is, instead of course, we study about nature, we study about bioclimate, we study about all of the factors that are the parameters that affects architecture directly. But what we actually do is we learn from these women, we learn from their environment, we learn from everything that is alive in their context. So we believe that if we learn how they live, we're going to learn a little bit how they see the world. So also we make the bridge. So we learn with them and we make the bridge between them and students, because also students are going to be the new architects, right? Producing the built environment. So also bringing up these questions that we're learning from them to the schools. And also the academical world have a very powerful tool that is the patient capital. So we don't need to follow deadlines of the economical system, but we can keep on rethinking and experimenting and prototyping and serving and speculating about different ways, or not methodologies, but methodologies how to create architecture. So this was our first experience building Jaja's house in Uganda. And it was quite a powerful experience to see how we could rethink the construction technologies based on a daily ritual, on the body of the daily rituals of the local women. And now that we're working with, it's beautiful also how the coincidence, they just synchronize, because now we're working with Maria Luisa, that is Abuela Cuenta Cuentos in Mexico, Oaxaca. And they're a group of indigenous women, and they have very much more clarity. Well, not that they do have much more clarity, we can communicate easily, because the 3 years that I was in Uganda, I spoke very little Luganda and Jaja, and the women spoke very little English. So we didn't need actually to talk to communicate. So that's another factor, right? Nature doesn't talk to each other. It talks in a different way. So that's another factor that we learn how to produce architecture without having to speak the same language. And now that we are in Mexico, because of the Spanish, right, we can communicate better and learn also through the spoken word, especially because Maria Luisa, it's a narrator. So the spoken word is her tool. And she is talking about this prophecy of the indigenous people from Latin America, the Caribbean, and North America, that is to synchronize the people that have been, the Western people that have been developing science and the intellectual, and the people that are perceiving life intuitively. So being guided through well, intuition and all of the ancestrality that we are also curious about. So they're saying now that we're going to go through a new era, and this is us as architects serving her. So how we are translating this new prophecy that is their life values into architecture, that we are now in the era of the Quetzal, that it's the bird Quetzal, which means that we're now integrating, that we must integrate, because the fragmentation, the separation between the intellectuals, they say the Águila people and the Condor people, the intuitively people, they're actually curious, but their separation created chaos. So how, that's the era of Quetzal, how now we're gonna team up and be together and create new life that looks for balance, or yes, so listen to each other and team up. So that's where we're at now.
It is so inspiring to see architects as bridge, as connectors, as integrators. I used to think that just in management, we have to integrate the different parts of the company, right? But seeing architects as integrators, and as you described, Mariana, process. Architecture is a process. Like Alessandra was saying, innovation is a process. And I say in Briyah, by mentioning the other systems thinkers that I learned from, that systems thinking is process thinking. And it is time for us to integrate more and more. You were speaking about that the project in Uganda, and I was also remembering what Wesley said, the restorative side of architecture, the project here in Miami with the pink covering and the birds coming back. There was a project in Brazil done by IP Institute, and they connected parts of forests that were separated by urbanization and created the corridors of life. And just by connecting one piece of fragment of forest here with another piece of fragmented forest there, the birds came back, the animals came back, life came back, nature came back. And then the other day, I was here at a talk by the Minister of Environment from Ecuador and Uruguay, and they were saying that Ecuador is building a corridor of life under the sea from Galapagos to Costa Rica. Isn't that amazing, right? That, you know, we can use science to reconnect pieces that were destroyed by us, and life comes back in such a, you know, fantastic way. Whew. Okay, so I would like to just engage our audience here real quick. We have more people joining us, and I have a poll just to test the waters and see how they feel about what we're talking here, and then we'll go back to the questions. And I want you to share images too, if you have images, because this is beautiful to make more visual effect of what you're saying that is so powerful. But let's put the poll up, please, Isabella. Let's see our audience here. How do they feel? Do you feel you are an artist, a scientist, or both? So please let us know if you are in the audience with us and you feel you're an artist or a science or both. Please let us know. And then we will see the results in another second. There you go. Okay. So more artists, 67% of our audience considers themselves artists and 33% consider scientists, but nobody considered themselves both. Interesting, huh? I would say that at least the three speakers here are both, but anyways. And the next question I have for our audience, so please, Isabella, let's have the second question of the poll. Can we share that with the audience, please? Okay, so do you see yourself as independent from nature, in alignment with nature, or as part of nature? We may have influenced that question already, the answers, because we've spoken so much about it. But let's see. So the answers, okay, 83% said as part of nature and 17% in alignment with nature. Yes, I think we spoiled them, but that's good. Thank you so much for being with us in this conversation. And I will get back to their present work, how nature is inspiring the present work. Alessandra, if you want to share an image with our audience, I have seen some of your projects and I am in awe by everything you do. So please, enlighten us with how this biomimicry can be, tangible and help us in real life.
Well, I brought some pictures about Votu Hotel, which is a hotel that was designed with biomimicry for south part of Bahia, which is northeast of Brazil, a very hot and humid area. I work with two pillars with biomimicry, with education, teaching a lot, because I love to learn, and so a very good way to learn is to teach. So you learn more than you think you are teaching, actually, and also consulting. So I do a lot of consulting for organizations. I used to do a lot of with architecture. I just came back from an Amazon experience with architectures. We were doing some experiments, some observations, some very, very intriguing work with them over there, because even though we are part of nature and we all learn from nature, our educational system and the way we are growth, the way we are educated, you never ask nature how nature would do first off, design something, and this is how we do with biomimicry. So instead of you're gonna do a hotel, so you're thinking about, oh geez, an architect, it's very nice. I was married to architects. My best friends are architects. I worked with an architect, so I'm very I'm very familiar
family, right?
with them. And they think with a pencil, a pen in their hands, they start to draw immediately, right after you give some challenge. And this is what the challenge about biomimicry. When you have something to develop, instead of trying to draw, you ask how nature would do, how nature would solve this. So this is a change in the process, because you have to hold on your creative process in the very beginning to learn from nature, and then you put everything together, of course, because creative process is from zero to the end, but it's just the way it starts. So we're gonna show just the photo. We're gonna show a lot of what I do, but just very briefly. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Let me put on full. So I like this quote from Janine Benius. So she says, the answer to our questions are everywhere. We just need to change the lens with which we see the world. So nature has everything to learn. If you don't know how to learn from them, we still don't know how to make the right question from nature. And this is very key when we are learning from nature. How can we convert the questions? How can we, because nature doesn't talk human language. So how can you translate what you need to know, what you need to solve into nature's language? So it's a matter to upgrade or to enhance the language. So this is the Votu Hotel. We have some challenges. Now we focus more for biomimicry solution, more into the building. So it's a place with very high temperature. Average temperature is about 24 degrees Celsius, which is, as an average, is pretty high. And high humidity. So Bahia, where I'm living now, and where this project was in the beginning, when this project was is a very humid area. Somehow we are a little bit close, similar to Amazon in terms of humidity and temperature, because we don't have this abundance of fresh water, but we have this abundance of salt water, of ocean, and high temperature. So quite similar to Miami. So we were focusing on this thermal comfort in order to solve with biomimicry. We, as Mariana said, in the biomimicry process, we do dig a lot into the context. So you understand social barriers, you understand ecological keys, ecological response, we understand climate response, we understand, we research about culture, human culture. We try to have this diagnosis completely from the region. And when we were doing this project, we learned that is a prevailing wind, and it's very constant, and we could do something about it. So we were focused on thermal comfort, and we know that we have this beautiful wind flow blowing. I'm sitting in front of the window, and sometimes I see my hair blowing. So it's always windy here. So it's something to do with it. So something to take as an opportunity, not a barrier or a problem. So we did the process of biomimicry, looking to different organisms, different species, and we were inspired by those three. Not necessarily you need to be inspired by local species. You can be inspired by local species, and it would be awesome, but you're more into strategies. So we were into how those organisms, they control temperature, they exchange temperature, they self-shaded, how they deal with this issue about thermal comfort. We were very inspired for the Bengaluru with the prairie dog. So it's a mammal that lives in the prairies of Canada, very low temperature during 6 months per year, and they live in those caves 10 meters below surface, so very deep caves, and they need a very good ventilation system, otherwise they couldn't breathe. They would have some problem of breathing and health issues. And they have this very simple process called Bernoulli principle, which is being translated by physics. It's a relationship between the pressure of the air and the speed of the air, the speed of the wind. So they create those bumps in order to lower the speed of the ventilation, to increase the pressure, to air get inside, to in blow, and then to outblow, releasing the air with more comfortable exits or better openings. And we did our prototype, our Bangalore, with the same principle, how we could take the architecture as a fixture in order to reduce the velocity of the air, to create the just flow of their intake, and also their exhale, their flow. Sorry, I'm missing some words, but it's okay. So some wind simulation, and here is the render, the image. We have this project is being in ArchDaily and also in other magazines of architecture. So we have a lot of schematic designs and plans and the physical prototype in order to calculate how the wind is gonna get in and out. But this is the render, how the air would blow into the room. So it's a very simple system that you could close and open. So it depends if you are in the Bangalore or outside the Bangalore, the wind could blow all the time in 24 hours, or you don't need to. The idea was to avoid returning from the beach or returning from somewhere. You need to put the air conditioning very, very high, because you're not exchanging the air circulation. There are many ways to exchange and to improve air ventilation without doing biomimicry with permaculture, with many technologies, but we are inspired by this prairie dog, how we could take advantage from the winds and put more just flow into the room, and to create a better thermal condition. And also we were concerned about the increase of heat during the day. So we were inspired by the cactus to have this self-shading, and the way this cactus, our as well, it's very good in order to do convective airflow. So there's always one part that is being shaded and one is exposed to the sun. So the air goes in up and down all the time. So it's not a plane and surface that's gonna receive all the heat, is gonna maintain the heat during the day. So you always have some shading, and this is helps in order to avoid the building to gain heat during the sun exposure. So this is the final render with our garden roof, and just cladding, self-shading cladding, and with the internal parts that already show about their air intake.
This is the hotel in Bahia. I want to go there.
Yeah, it's very close to where I live now. It's not built yet, but it's like 20 minutes walking from where I am now. Very close. And another solution, I'm a huge fan of toucans, and they are very smart birds, and they control their thermal temperature by putting their blood circulation into their peak during the day in order to exchange more, to create more surface area to exchange more. And during the night, they do the opposite. They close the blood circulation from their peak to their body in order to conserve more temperature. So we did some very simple solution for the kitchen in order to exchange some temperature. Some final ranging, I'm not explaining the project, but that will be the concept of self-shading all the buildings and how to take advantage from garden roofs and everything. And that was it, pretty quick.
Thank you, Alessandra. This is very nice. So toucan, prairie dogs, and cactus, inspiring.
And cactus. Cactus are very wise. Seriously, architects can be very inspired by cactus. They are very simple plants, but they have so much know-how. It is amazing.
Very resilient too, right?
Super resilient, and they have this shape. They can be expanded by having more water inside. So everything we say nature is multifunctional. It's not a one form that is doing just one thing. It's always doing more of those responding to the environment or to whatever pressure that could be predator or whatever.
See, this is what it takes to get a biologist married to an architect. You can't help it. The cross-pollination.
Le Corbusier was an architect that always, because I was in the architecture field, so I have to I have to help the biologists that working with the architects. And he has a very small book about urban planning that I have just in Portuguese. And he says in a very beautiful way how biology and architecture, they are close to each other, like how they look process, how they take and they understand flows, how they understand what people would like to do here or there. So it's pretty much how nature is responding. I think Wesley did mention something about it, but Le Corbusier did a long time ago in a very elegant way.
Yeah, actually, you know, one of the architectural movements that most inspires our work is something called metabolism, and that was kind of post-war, you know, architectural, and it dabbled into other design fields, but it was after the devastation of Hiroshima in Japan, and so a group of young architects at the time sort of looked around, and they found that man's dedication to nature, or constant search for demanding, taking over nature for their own development, really had created this. And so they embarked on this new architectural movement to detach the kind of architectural terra firma, or the city from dependency on nature. And we always want to build our cities closer to the edge, at the threshold between water and land, in the valleys of mountains. And these are really vulnerable and precious areas. And so they had kind of derived their architectural movement off of that. But the main component of it was that it's not something that's fixed and singular. That architecture and cities, they're intended to evolve, much like the seasons and the lessons I learned from seasons. They grow, they thrive, and then they die, and you move on. And so I think when we're talking about architecture, it's not just so much about how it serves us today and in this moment, but what will happen after. And that may inform material selections and everything. There's a culture, I think, around the world, specifically in Miami, of wanting to kind of preserve ourselves, whether it's through plastic surgery or other cosmetic means. But we age as people in nature, and our buildings should age in nature too. So it's fascinating, because I think your work, Alessandra, is sort of a more contemporary representation of what I think the metabolists were doing, and it's really, I know that it's an honor for me to be in this discussion with the both of you, really. So thank you, Adriana, for putting this together. It's been a pleasure.
Well, and you are doing inspiring work too, and as they said, helping your students understand that architecture is this process, this cycle, and beautiful work is coming from your office. So would you like to share any images with us today, or just talk about it?
I don't. I meant to send images, but I apologize. I don't have images to share. But what I would do is, any viewers out there, I would invite you to visit our website and our social media platform. We're constantly sharing not only finished projects, but projects that are in process. It's important to understand how we talked about how the buildings respond to nature. There's a real process in terms of how to curate that. And we very much love to share that with the world through those social media platforms. But unfortunately, I don't have any images to share today, so I apologize for that.
That's fine. And I was just going to mention to them that I saw one of your students' presentation the other day, and the idea of the aquapuncture, capturing the water from the rain and the oxygen back to the water. And this is exactly a very visual description of everything we have been discussing so far.
Yeah, and it was intended also, that was because in our research of the Bay, what was missing most in the Bay to kind of re-spark or regenerate the network of habitat that existed there was the the over-salination of the Bay through the lack of oxygen. And so the one way to kind of add oxygen into the Bay was through aeration, and this idea of collecting rainwater and allowing it to sort of fall into the Bay, which would aerate the water and generate more oxygen. But also, the building was designed to kind of be removed. It wasn't a permanent thing. It was something that was designed to stay there, to spark that regeneration, but then remove itself and perhaps go on to another location. Another example is a project we did for downtown Miami, the Bayfront Amphitheater, where we were hired to design a solar pavilion for that outdoor amphitheater. And instead of having just sort of a roof, we decided to create a more iconic figure, which was a circle, and on top of the circle was solar panels, and from within the circle it would sort of deploy a fabric awning system, and it was also a communicator. So during the day when the structure was collecting energy, it would be stored, and then at night the structure would actually illuminate to indicate how much energy was collecting during the day. So in a bright sunny day, it would be brightly illuminated, sort of as a halo in the middle of the Bayfront Park in the city. And then during a rainy day, it would be more dim. And so in this way, it kind of communicates and educates the city, what this type of infrastructure can do. Infrastructure doesn't have to be necessarily strung along poles or run underground. It can be in our cities, and in a way to kind of service us and also nature. So yeah, I wish I had more examples to show image-wise, but definitely please, if you have the time to visit our website, I definitely encourage it.
We'll definitely share the links to all of your websites after we post the recording. So thank you, Wesley. Mariana, you want to share some images with us of your beautiful projects?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly share just for a little bit of images that illustrate the things that I have been sharing. So I won't talk much, but so I don't repeat myself. But let me show you. Are you seeing my screen?
It's beginning to show now. Yes.
It's downloading here. Can you see now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So this is Jaja's house. I'm going to pass through because this is an actual presentation. So it calls why and what do we do? What's the process of work? Oops. Where do we do it? Who are the people that are part of the organization? This path of actually immersing. So we have the methodology of deconstructing ourselves first. So we allow ourselves to give ourselves the permission to unlearn the things that we learn, being an apprentice with the community that we're there. So we completely immerse ourselves, and then we start the design and the process, and then we start the research and communication, and we go back and forth in this process. So, well, this is Jaja. And here I wanted to show a little bit about what is learning with the people about, because we actually have this standards of how do we seat, how do we eat, how do we use the objects, right? And these are also helpful but limiting ideas too, because there are so many different cosmovisions how to perceive matter. So here is Jaja in her daily rituals, using tools and moving her body in a completely different way. As architects, for us to serve her, we need to actually learn what is her life about, and also what is the productive chain of the materials and the vernacular architecture, so we can consider all of these aspects in actually being able to collaborate and doing a participative project. Where is it? And here is us with the students developing this idea, this questioning. So here's also the modular of Le Corbusier. So here's actually a critic about this modular that is telling us how to measure our bodies and use and standardize our bodies to create cities. But we're the bodies are so diverse. So we must consider all of the bodies. And when we create a standard body of actually a white man of 1 meters, and we say that tools will serve this man, spaces will serve this man, what kind of built environment are we building? For who are we actually building? So we created this whole system of understanding the woman's body of the local community and see how we could build the house with this ergonometry that we learned from. We built the house in 6 weeks, and we built the house through construction processes of teaching women how to build. So we were discussing about gender roles and also about hierarchy on the work site. And here's the final house, Jaja's house with gift, that is her granddaughter. And now I'll just show one more project, that is Abuela Cuenta Cuento. And we went through the same process, immersing in her life and learning from her, creating the project of her house. And well, then we have a lot of other initiatives, but I'll stop sharing for we to proceed.
Thank you, Mariana. I love the idea of unlearning to be more expansive and creative in terms of what we know and can do. And that also reminds me of the exhibit itself, that the 55 project that you have helped organize, and the way that you picked the artists and the paintings and the reconnection with nature is very vivid there, and through ancestry, which is part of the work you're showing us too, right?
It's also amazing how in your work, the process of building the home is not just sort of about building the home, but teaching the family a new craft that then can be propagated and relearned and retaught throughout the community. So it's sort of like this, it's quite amazing how like the power of architecture could translate people's lives, not only in sort of like the physical way, but in an economical way and in many other ways, to improve their well-being. So that's really inspiring.
Yes, and
sorry.
Before I go to you, I just want to remind our audience, we are getting close to the end, but please, if you have a question for our panelists, please feel free to ask in the chat and we'll make sure that they respond. But go ahead, Mariana.
I was going to comment that actually the built environment is quite generous for us to get to know what we are thinking and collectively producing, because it's a pure manifestation of our collective unconscious. We can learn a lot about what are actual logics when we see how we live life and what we have manifested in matter, because from a drawing, we build matter. And so what we are actually doing, and we can do the opposite way, seeing us, all of the people, all of the agents building, questioning ourselves, what is the built environment that we want to build? And what are the tools that we have to build this new environment?
So it's very systemic to me, like the exchange. Yeah? So it's not only offering something and repeating that because it's been done like that forever, but it's listening to the new ways of living. So we have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought your job, your project, Mariana, it's very interesting. I really enjoy to see your presentation, and reminds me something that we really emphasize in biomimicry. That's not learning about something, it's learning with something. So it's not that you're gonna learn about something by studying far away or by giving this option, like we know everything, so I'm gonna give you the best house for you in your car, in this very typical climate, and you're gonna be very happy. No, that should be happen. So you learn with, and from learning with, I think there's more possibility of this process of silence a little bit of our knowledge in order to receive more information and build from there. And I think nowadays that we need to be very smart with climate change and everything. We're not gonna answer everything just with technology or pre-engineering solutions. We need to be dancing. What is our surrounding saying to us? How can we learn with in order to build something that's gonna be aligned, that's gonna be attuned to the best response? So I think it's a beautiful process. I like to
your comment is totally connected with the question we received from Patricia Mendes. She's asking how architecture can help protect nature. So who wants to go? We're just talking about this dance of how we learn with, and there's also this exchange. So who wants to say something about how architecture can help protect nature and conserve what we have in this planet? Go ahead, Mariana.
Go ahead, you take it, Mariana.
Well, maybe I'll say something more general. I would say it's putting a lot of weight in architecture, as architecture was this big solution, right? And seeing architecture as as what we have put in architecture. Architecture is one of the tools to protect nature, right? And putting architecture as this, I think it's putting a lot of weight in architecture in action. And maybe it's rethinking architecture, rethinking architectural discourse, rethinking the architect's position in society, right? For example, no, I won't give this example because it's already said. There's a series now in Netflix and talking about architecture, and it's an architecture that we have been talking for decades about certain men doing architecture, big masters, but architecture is so much more than that nowadays that I would love to see architecture being dissolved in part of this. Maybe it's also part of our own learning, our individual learning, how to belong to all of this, belong to the problem and belong to the solution, and also being the warriors, but being the people that are causing this. So I see architecture as a tool of people, and I would question how to dissolve architecture as part of it, as not the one that is going to actually protect and save our built environment.
We're going to go to Wesley next, but there's a comment here. So the concept of belonging is so important, and you touched it. And this is part of one of the properties of systems that puts parts together, that glues us up, as a system, is the belonging. And as you said, we're part of it. And there's an example that Jan Jacobstam from the Netherlands gives all the time in his talks is when you are in a traffic jam, it's not that you have to be upset because you are going to be late because there is this traffic jam hindering you. No, you are the traffic jam because you are part of it too. You are there. So you see it in a totally different perspective the minute you acknowledge that, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think and I was going to pick up on similar themes, that I don't think the two are necessarily mutually exclusive per se, that, nature sort of can be architecture and made of architecture and vice versa. And I think we have to be careful sometimes that, sometimes our interventions or protections of nature then have reactions to those systems that create further issues elsewhere in other types of systems. So I think part of it is kind of accepting change. And there was a lot of talk initially in the early 2000s about sustainability and sort of sustaining the status quo. And then it went into resilience and being resistant to the forces that are coming from nature. And now I would argue that it's sort of becoming more about transformation and adaptation and sort of accepting these things, but learning how to adapt our everyday lives to these changing conditions that are existing. Those forces are beyond us. They're not, I don't think there's any sort of silver bullet or silver solution to save or protect nature per se, but how can we use those tools to adapt our lifestyles and our future to live with those new conditions, I think is really the right solution.
And it is so perfect what you just said. We have to accept change. Change is part of the equation. It's part of the process. And that has to be taken into consideration as a natural thing, as a permanent thing. Okay?
May I add something about this? Yeah, I'm enjoying those answers, and I just like to add a little comment. Mostly, resilience in nature is a collective response. So we have individuals that have some adaptations, some technologies, they can enhance their ability to go through disturbances. But most of resilience, when you talk about system, when you talk about ecosystems, is a collective response. And I think when we talk about architecture, we think about unit, this building, this house, this element, this and that. We never thinking about this neighborhood, this city, this area. We never respond in a collective way. It's more in a very individual. I think this is I'm not saying something that is utopic because of this financial system, the capitalism and everything, but the way we design our city, our neighborhood, it's one by one. Like if you have water, good for you. If you don't have water, never gonna share water with someone that has a huge tank and not use that huge tank of water. So nature never built something that's not integrated, that's not sharing, that's not collective. And we have like a lot of things when you're talking about very developed ecosystem. We have a lot of co-evolution. So evolution that are coexisting to one organism with another. And you humans, we have a very hard, very, very high resistance to how we're gonna build collective solutions. Like we need to be very comfortable in our unit, in ourselves, in our this and that. And I think when you're talking about how can we build up really resistance and really resilience, we need to change some pattern about unit for collective, for how can we share more.
You just answered the next question asked by Liana Rivas. How can we make all this technology and architecture innovations more affordable? You just nailed it. So instead of thinking of one building, one project, one this at a time, integrating it will definitely make it more affordable, will it not? What would you say, the three of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the classic architect's response, which is that I don't claim to be an economist, but what I do know about, I don't claim to be an economist, but what I do know about economics is that, scarcity creates increase in pricing. And so I think the more that we see these systems, obviously this sort of, these sort of advanced technologies and things like that are expensive. There are incentive programs. And then over time, as more become available, pricing comes down. But I would argue that in the work of Mariana, for example, these aren't expensive materials that she's working with. These aren't expensive building technologies. These are very sort of trained and learned and sort of passed down, through family and generations, crafts that are learned and taught. And so I think not all innovations have to be expensive, and unattainable. I think they can be learned, and we can frankly learn a lot from these past crafts that have kind of been forgotten in a way.
This is so beautiful. You pointed out specifically about Mariana, but not all innovation is created in an expensive way or can be expensive. And I love the way Maturana also talks about innovation, that if you know what it is that you want to conserve, and then if you want to conserve affordability, that can be conserved and you can free yourself to innovate around it. So it's just, counterintuitive most of the times for people who are thinking of innovation as a very expensive process that happens in a lab. But if you take the systems thinking approach, you can come up with amazing things that not necessarily cost a fortune. Nice. Mariana, you were going to say something?
I would say something that maybe is quite provocative, but I'll share with compassion. I would say that is a matter also of will, because the resources are infinite. We have very much to share, and who is serving who? Technology is actually innovations and technology are serving what is the priority? What is the actual problem? Because we have intelligence, we have financial resources, but what are the priorities? And for me to have priorities, it takes will. So how can we make this technology and architectural innovations more affordable? Questioning what are our priorities through will. Yeah, so that's the comment that I wanted to see. This talking about a person that lives in the US and lived in Uganda and saw the priorities, right? they're just different. So it takes will to change.
Yep. And accepting change, just like Wesley said before. All right, so we're getting towards the end, and I would like to have time for each one of you to share a message to our audience that has to do with whatever you want to say. So, Alessandra, I will go to you first. What is your message to our audience?
I think we need to challenge ourselves in some concepts. So, for instance, technology. What it is technology? Technology has to come from an industry with the less material, the less solution, with just less, and they're going to be very high-end, very expensive. Or technology, it's using some know-how that could be 10,000 years ago with indigenous people, with this and that. It can be adapted into our routine, in our needs, and this can be technology. So first of all, I think we need to challenge ourselves about those concepts and how we are really open for new ways of doing things. And if there's something to do as a message, I think the time is running, the bell is ringing. I live by the ocean. I live in the coast area of Brazil, and I can observe climate change every day. So it's not something that is on paper. It's not something that it's on news. It's something that we are living. So if we are living this, can we remain having the same lifestyle that we always had? Can we build the same houses that we used to do? Can we build the same buildings? Can we change our vision about growing food in the cities, about growing this and that? How can we learn from the responses that we are feeling in our skin? And the message would be, remember that nature is everywhere. We have more microorganism cells in our body than human cells. So we are a collective system. We are not only individuals, and that's our evolution response. And that's how you succeeded to be this fantastic body and this fantastic mind with this intelligence. So how can we learn to be more nature, learn how to be more, use our body and our intelligence to be as nature as well, and learning how to respond in this climate change, and be aware that we are facing a very critical time. It's not something that it can be postponed, that's not serious, that it's okay, don't worry about it. It's very, very serious. So that's my message.
Thank you, Alessandra. And we also have Cibele Rocha thanking us for the webinar. This topic is so necessary. We need more talks like that. Thank you, Cibele, for being with us. And I'll pass the word to Wesley to say his message to our audience. Please, Wesley.
Yeah, so I was thinking to your very kind and generous introduction where you mentioned ambition and optimism. And I think that's an important message to take away. I think in order to kind of create ambition or to design with ambition, I think we need to be, as architects, designers, very, very radical in our thinking. In the example of a project, we had an idea to convert the alleyways of Miami Beach, like the entire network of alleyways, into urban gardens and new bioswales, and completely sort of soften that component of the city. And we approached the city with it, and it might have been radical to some, but the city actually really appreciated it and had sponsored us to actually do a pilot project. And so those things come out of this idea of ambition. And then optimism, I think, tapping into our kind of younger selves, and we grow up sort of with an optimistic view of the world, but then somewhere along the line we forget it and we lose it. And I think those two things are very, very powerful to deal with these issues that for example, Alessandra, we're talking about in terms of climate change and other issues. So ambition and optimism is something that I would definitely leave with this panel and this talk today.
And I hope to see more of Kodo's work integrating the environment here in Miami, Wesley. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank you so much.
Mariana, your message to our audience, please.
Well, I'll start my message with the invitation to go to see the exhibit, because I saw in the exhibit, I was constantly observing the people going to the gallery and feeling very, very touched. So we have, maybe there is this lack of optimism saying, no, people don't care. We cannot not care, because as Alessandra also said, we are underlying part of it in our bodies. So we are suffering and we don't know, we are feeling all of the pain of nature is within us. We are part of it. So when I saw people going to the exhibit, it was a process of integration. It's okay to feel, to see, we can handle it. We can handle all of the emotions. We don't need to rationalize and create all the time. We can just feel it. So going to the exhibit for me, it was a tool that I saw that we can integrate. We are brave enough to feel all of these changes. And I would say also to be curious, for us to stay curious, to trust, and to be curious also to what are the indigenous people and leaders, intellectual leaders that are putting themselves out there, entering our system, talking within our social codes, to what should we do? Because they're great people having amazing perspectives of what can we do. So that's my suggestion. Yes. And thank you so much, all of you, as Alessandra, Adriana. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Accept change, ambition and optimism, transformation. We can do it. We can be leaders. This is exactly what we say, Mariana, at the Briyah Institute. We can embrace our leadership journeys wherever we are. And it doesn't matter if it seems a small contribution only, but it can have a ripple effect and it can be fantastic. So yes, let's visit the exhibit, the 55 Project. Let's see if Maria comes back to say goodbye to all of you. And we've had some very nice comments here from our audience. Mateo said the webinar was really good. Let me know about the next ones. Congratulations. And Gabriela said amazing. Thank you all for this talk. So thank you all for being with us today in the audience or speaking, sharing your stories, beautiful stories. We'll share the links to all of your websites so our audience can see more images, and pictures speak more than words. So I'm sure they will have a thrill seeing the beautiful work you do. And Maria, final words from one of the co-founders of the
project. Final words for me after this amazing, thoughts and statements and everything. I just have to say that accept changes. You said it's possible when we are open our mind and create opportunities to learn and acquire a knowledge, education. And I learned a lot with you guys, and I hope everybody, have the same feeling. And basically, this is the mission, this is the intention of the 55 Project Foundation, create opportunities like today, and I just would like to invite, thank you, Mariana, already. She's already talked about, the exhibition. Yeah, go to the gallery. And also, I would like to invite you all to go to the 55 Project website.com, explore the website. And if you want to support our mission, be a member of the 55 Project. We have 3 levels. So that's the best way to support the Arts Foundation. And if you have any questions, any ideas, suggestions, you can send email to info@the55project.com. Thank you very much. It was amazing.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks, everybody. It was a very inspiring night. Stay well and stay tuned for the next episode of the series Nature Connects, art and science. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very nice.